Were you surprised by the breastfeeding learning curve, even if you did meet your goals? I have spoken to so many parents who have told me after the fact, I had no idea how long it was going to take to feel comfortable breastfeeding or body feeding my baby. I had no idea how much there was to learn about milk supply, about positions, about things that can go wrong, about pumping, about returning to work. There is so much to learn. And one of the reasons there is so much to learn is because we do not live culturally in a time and place where people feed their babies anywhere and everywhere. That being said, I'm so happy to share this episode with my guest, Caitlin, who talks about this learning curve and how surprising it can be that it can take so much time to feel comfortable feeding our babies. Even though it's something we do 8, 10, 11, 12 times a day, it can still take quite a while to feel like, hey, I've got this. So enjoy this beautiful episode with Caitlin. When I first returned to work, I had no idea how I was going to manage going to work, handling drop-offs and pickups, and doing all the other duties I needed to do, like get dinner on the table. If you are in this situation, I've got a solution for you. Go to feastandfettle.com, where you can select from a menu of delicious options and have home-cooked meals delivered right to your front door. Imagine taking meal planning off your plate, taking grocery shopping off your plate for those dinners, and knowing that all you have to do is pick up your baby, get home, and heat and serve meals that you have selected for your family. If you live in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and now Maine, go to feastandfettle.com and use my code MILK, MILK, to get $30 off your first order. You've got nothing to lose. Hi, Caitlin. Welcome to the Milk Making Minutes. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Yeah. So before we get started hearing your baby feeding stories, why don't you introduce yourself and your family?
Sure. My name's Caitlin. I'm the co-host of the CK and GK podcast, which is just a fun show for moms who need a little bit of a laugh, but also want to learn something new. It could be something silly, could be some I don't know, that maybe adults need to know that I didn't know until I studied up for the show. I am a mom of 7 years. So my son is 7 and I just have the one, but he challenges me every day, as those of us with any children know. And my partner, my husband is, he and I have been together for almost 20 years now. So, yeah,
Wow.
we're just a tiny little family, but a little happy one, and we have some fun together.
Yeah, that's amazing. How long have you been doing your podcast?
Actually, Thanksgiving will be right around 2 years. So, yeah, and it's been a very fun little thing for us to do, and 2 years is crazy. We're almost to our 100th episode, which is wild.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Great. I'll be sure to link everything about your podcast
Sounds
in the show
great.
notes, also all your socials, all of that. But I'd like to take you back to your to your cultural upbringing and have you talk about the exposure you had to baby feeding from your earliest memories.
Oh, that's a good question. I'm from an Irish Catholic family. There are 5 of us. I have a brother and 3 sisters, and I'm significantly older than at least my youngest sister. My brother is 6 years younger than me, and my youngest sister is 12 years younger than me. So I was old enough to see all of the processes that happened, like leading into the pregnancy I saw, and then I also saw all of the aftermath with my mom and her having my siblings. And it was I remember that she always nursed. I'm pretty sure she always covered up in terms of she would have like, the burp cloth over or whatever. And I think also part of it was like, don't distract the baby. Very much, stop it, whatever you're doing. I mean, in a house full of several children, the baby is going to get distracted while nursing. But it was never a secret. It was always like, this is how the baby feeds. And if I remember like she would always go in private to feed too. Like it was, if we weren't at home, she would always go like someplace where it was quiet and private and she wouldn't have to deal with people and all that. But in terms of, it was never taboo in my house, which was a good thing, I think, for us growing up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially because you were old enough to obtain those memories.
totally.
Yeah. And did you play with dolls when you were
I
young?
did. Um, I wasn't like a super big doll player, but yeah, I definitely like stuffies and stuff. And we would have tea party and all that kind of thing. And I was a Barbie kind of kid for sure. So yeah, I definitely did that. But I don't know. I don't know where I have the feeling I know where this is going, but no, I didn't ever pretend to like nurse or anything like that. I didn't take care of the baby the way that some people do, but I did pretend to bottle feed the baby. I remember doing
Yeah.
that kind of thing with the dolls for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, great. That's what I was going for. It's interesting to hear what people respond to how they did pretend play with babies because it shows what has become normalized. Even
Mm,
if in our family, one feeding option is normalized, I talk to very few people who, as young kids themselves, did pretend play feeding a baby from their body.
mm,
Whereas when I ask, and maybe you have an answer to this, when I ask current day moms if their children ever pretended to feed babies from their bodies, often they did. So I think there has become more of a normalized that did not exist when we were younger, because even if our parents fed, it kind of not widely seen in
right.
society in general.
At least for me, it was like the 80s and 90s, right? So like it wasn't
Right.
nearly as acceptable. Oh, it's interesting. My son is an only child, so he hasn't had that much exposure to feeding a baby from a body.
Mhm.
However, he is very much aware that that is how he like fed for the first year of his life. Was we did that together, and I would like to normalize it for him a little bit more, but I personally don't have that opportunity because I only have the one child. But if it ever were to come up, certainly I would make sure he knew exactly what was going on because it is important that we normalize that behavior. It's ancient behavior. So why not make it be something that's visible and present and
Yeah. Yeah,
accepted?
so true. So then you've been with your partner for a long time.
Mm.
Yeah, so once it was your turn to have a child, talk to me about a little bit about the prenatal time during pregnancy, what you were thinking about when it came to baby feeding, and then you can segue as you feel fit into your feeding journey.
Sure. So pregnancy for us was not easy to attain. I think initially with the pregnancy, it was just relief. Oh wow, I'm pregnant. Oh, it took us this long, and this one's sticking. So that was a big deal, and I think so for me it was mostly just relief up until the nausea hits, and even then, when you have been trying to be pregnant, you are grateful for any symptoms that you have because it's reassuring. I would say my husband during that time was anxious. I was a teacher, a public school teacher, so I made X number of dollars that are not enough. And my husband is an attorney. And at the time, he had gotten a second degree in law and was just really searching for the right fit for a position for him. And it was hard for him to get to that point. So I think he got more and more nervous as baby got bigger and bigger. Whereas I don't know. I think I again was mostly just relieved for a lot of it. And
Mhm.
then
Yeah.
interestingly, as my due date got closer, I got more and more nervous and he got more and more excited. It was like we met in the middle, like right
Mm.
around that halfway point. Like, we're both excited right around 20 weeks when we found out that our baby was a boy. And then I got started to get nervous because I was like, oh, no, he'll just stay in. Like, it'll be fine. My life will be exactly the
Mm.
same. He'll just stay in. And I'm cute pregnant. So it'll
Right.
I was adorable. I had a little basketball under my belly. I was so cute. So I was just like, this will be fine. And he was just like, he's coming soon. He got excited. And in terms of nursing, it was never a question for me whether or not I would try to. I always have felt like I was in a lot of mom groups, and I have felt whatever works best for you is really the way that this needs to go. If nursing's not a part of your motherhood, that is an okay thing because your baby is fed and loved and cared for, and that's what we need the most. But for me, it was I would really like to be able to do this. And then there was like the added bonus that I would always make the joke was like, "What's free?" So I might I might as well give it a shot. And then in terms of actually nursing, I remember for my mom watching her and having it be easy for her. Like it just looked like it just happened. And once again, for me, that was not my experience. My son did not latch right away. He when he did, it was a not good latch. I learned when he was 3 that he has a lip and a tongue tie, which was too late to learn that.
Mm,
I used a shield for the first probably 6 to 8 weeks, if not in order to try and get that latch the way we needed it to be. And then for some reason, whatever happened, maybe 3 or 4 months in, I didn't need it anymore. Maybe he just got better at it or we got better at it together. I think it's probably the real answer there. But it was not an easy thing for me, right?
yeah. Did you ever talk with your mom about that in hindsight, about what her experiences really were
I
like?
didn't. She was during that time, I like when my son was 7.5 weeks old, we moved from Colorado to Austin, Texas. And that is it was a very difficult thing. I quit my job up there that I loved very much. I lost all my friends because I moved away. I was a new mom. I didn't have my own mother nearby. There was a lot about that was a very stressful time. And so I would fly back to Colorado to visit my mom. I was probably going once a month for a little while for the first few months of his life. And I would bring him with me, obviously, because he was nursing. And my mom was very supportive. She always made sure that if I needed to rearrange a pillow, she was the one like rearranging the pillows and bringing me something to drink and draping things over my shoulders because you get those weird temperature changes while you're nursing and all of that stuff. But I think I was just so consumed with, is he doing this right? Am I doing this right? And being anxious that I never really asked her what her journey was like. And again, because when I was watching her as a 6, 8, 10, 12-year-old person, it looked so easy for her. And I think
Mm,
I was just like, how come it looked so easy for her, but it was so hard for me? And that was a really difficult thing to come to terms with, you know? And I had also
yeah.
asked my mom about her pregnancies and I had said, did you have a difficult time getting pregnant? And she's like, no, no, like we
Mhm.
decided to have a baby and then I was pregnant. And I'm like,
Mm,
so it was a little bit harder to relate, despite that she was so supportive and so king, and that's just who she is. But it was just like, if that was easy and it looked like it was easy for her to nurse, then I'm so anxious. I'm
right.
so concerned about this working that I didn't think to ask. I probably should have. I think I probably will now, now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting to have those conversations later. I've been a lactation professional for quite a few years now, and I had 100 and I don't know, 40 episodes out of the Milk Making Minutes
Wow.
before I learned from my mother that she breastfed each of us way longer than I thought, and I
Really?
my job is to have these conversations with people, and I had a story in my brain about how frequently she nursed each of us, and it was a wrong story.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so interesting.
Yeah, I did ask my mom, like, if she ever had mastitis, because there was a moment where I was like, "I think so," and she was like, "You'll know. I promise you'll know." And
Mm,
she said that hers was very frequent. But that's the most I ever got out
mm,
of her journey in terms of nursing. My mom also worked, full time and would get paid for overtime, so she did that as much as she could. You have that many children, you have
wow.
to do what you have to do. I think also she probably didn't nurse as long as she might have wanted to, which of course doesn't help with
Yeah,
mastitis or anything like that. Yeah.
right,
That's all I
yeah.
know though.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Were you surprised at how, anxious you felt about making breastfeeding work once you were doing it?
Yeah, yes and no. Uh, it is very much in my nature to be anxious. So the fact that I
Okay.
would be anxious about nursing is not that surprising. However, given the glorified nursing relationship that I had been either exposed to or read ever, or it's supposed to look like this easy, natural, beautiful thing. I really thought it was supposed to be that way for everybody. And so it stressed me out that I could not do it. Like
Mm,
it was a very, so maybe anxiety. It's also, it's so beyond your realm of control in some ways, right? Like everything
mhm.
about a baby, you think you know what's going to happen, and everyone's like, "Oh, you have no idea," but you really don't. And everything about what happens with this baby is out of your control. And that is not something that I handle well. So I think just the lack of control over everything anyway just contributed to all of that. I'm pretty sure I had some very intense postpartum anxiety, not so much depression, but at least anxiety. And it made everything about being a new mom more difficult, including the fact that I felt like I'm not nursing right. He's not latching right. I'm doing this wrong. He's not gaining enough weight. All those things that go along with it.
Yeah, yeah. I know a lot of many of us say in the prenatal period, I'm just gonna feed my baby however it works. I'm gonna
Hmm.
try to breastfeed,
Hmm.
and if that doesn't work out, then
It'll be
I'll
okay.
change the plan. It'll
Right.
be okay, and then when we're there doing it, it doesn't feel okay. For
Right.
some people, it does, and they're totally fine making the switch, and then for other people, it just feels more intense.
Totally. And again, it's not outside of my nature to be anxious about things, but I was like, I I did very much have that mentality. It's kind of like the whole when you're pregnant, you're like seeing kids at restaurants and you're like, oh, I'll never put a phone in front of my kid. It's that idea of like, I'll never do that. And it's very, for me, it was like, oh, I'll be totally fine. Like, I'm not even going to worry about it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'm going to be relaxed about it. And then you get into it and you're like, here's my phone, kid. Be quiet so I can eat. And for
Mm.
me, it was,
Mhm.
oh my God, this is not okay. I need to be able to do this because I need to be able to do it. And,
Right. Yeah.
and I had formula on hand if I needed it. He really didn't want to use it. And yeah, it was a lot of internal pressure to make it
Yeah.
work, to make it work for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, sometimes we start to feel guilty about that in and of
Mhm.
itself, like,
Totally.
"Why can't I let this go?"
Yep.
But I do think there is, for many people, just a primal urge to make it work. I don't think it's necessarily anything that's been wrongly internalized.
Right.
So this is the very first food for babies for all of human history. So, of course, we as mammals, many of us are going to feel very attached to feeding our babies that
Right.
way.
Totally. And again, I say this, the guilt thing is very real. Like my family was very supportive. Do what you need to do in order to be a surviving, functioning human. My husband was like, it's your body. Like whatever you have to do to make it work. Like I just want you to be okay. So whatever that means for you, it's totally fine. And I'm the one who's beating myself up about it because the latch isn't perfect or the latch hurt or he clearly was too skinny or things like that where I was just like beating myself up over it and it was all internal pressure. But yes, there is this urge. I really wanted to make it work. I really did.
Yeah, yeah. So let me take you to like your earliest moments of breastfeeding. What was it like out of the gate after you gave birth? What kind of setting were you in? Were you in a hospital?
I was in a hospital. Um I had write a birth plan if you must. Write a birth plan if you must, and then be prepared for, again, as I said, babies control everything. You control nothing. So be prepared to rip that birth plan in half and not use it at all. I uh, I was in like I was pushing for 2 hours and we were very close to saying, okay, we're gonna go in there ourselves if you can't do this. And when my son was, I initially wanted to do skin to skin right away, but he was not breathing when he first came out. He was purple and cone headed and all those things. And it scared me. My first moments after birth were fright. So I think when that's your very first experience, it completely colors your relationship with your child. And I mean that
Mm,
now, like looking at my 7-year-old, I still have flashbacks of that moment of like, why isn't he crying? Right. So
mm,
to me, I think it impacted how I viewed everything. That anxiety that I'm so prone to just immediately kicked into high gear. And of course, my son is happy, healthy, thriving, and all those things. But in that split second, in the it felt 5 minutes. I'm sure it was 15 seconds, right? Until he started crying. But that was traumatic for me. So then when you get to the actual nursing part, I had a lactation consultant who was very gentle in her tone. However, the things that she said felt unsupportive in the moment, if that makes any sense.
mm,
She did say
mhm.
things about my anatomy that were and keep in mind, hormonal person just gave birth. That hurt my feelings. Like it hurt my feelings for her to say some things like this. And I knew enough about being in mom groups and stuff that I was like, can you please check for a lip and tongue tie? Can you just check? I would really like to know that now because if he's this little and we can nip it right now, and make everyone's process easier, let's do that. And she's like, no, he doesn't have that. Yes, he and a severe one. She claimed it on me. So I
Mm,
internalized a lot of that.
mm,
And those first few days in the hospital were very difficult. And I immediately was beating myself up about what I could and could not. When I was very fortunate. The insurance plan I was on, the appointment that you have a few days after you get home was actually a home visit, which was lovely. If you have that as an option, my goodness, please take it. And that nurse was far more supportive, far more in terms of not only her tone, but how she delivered what she said to me. She was good about positioning me, positioning him. She stayed far longer than she needed to, and I cried with relief from her.
mm.
And from then, I
Oh,
felt like I could do this. She taught me how to use the shield. She taught me how to remove the shield if I needed to during the feeding and still keep things going. Like, she was a very supportive person. And um though the I would say the first like 3 or 4 days were very, very hard for me just in terms of that LC not being the supportive person that I needed, but the nurse really saved my relationship with nursing, I would say.
oh, I'm so sorry that was your experience with a
Yeah,
lactation consultant,
yeah.
and I'm so glad that you had somebody else
Mhm.
who came
Me
and
too.
made it right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you able and willing to say some of the things she said about your anatomy that were unsupportive?
She primarily talked about the size of my nipples. That was her big
Mm,
deal. She was like, they're large. They're never gonna fit. And I was like,
what?
last time I checked, they're pretty normal, like average size. And when I told the nurse that, she was like highly offended. She was like, first of
Mhm.
all, who says that? I was like, I don't
Right.
know. And she's like, that's not even true. She's like, you have no idea the things that I've seen in the line of work that I do. And I promise you, you are a very normal looking human being. And I was just
Right.
like, why would she have said that to me then? And she's like, some people just the tact she thinks that with her tone it's fine, but the words mattered also. And it was
Mhm.
completely not at all what is true. You know what I mean? You've seen other pictures of women like I was like, no, I'm pretty normal here. I don't know why she would have said that, but that is primarily what she was saying. So she blamed his inability to latch on my anatomy. And I was just like, I can't, well, first of all, I can't control that. So thanks. But it also made the shield a little bit uncomfortable because she recommended the wrong side. So it was like
Mhm.
it wasn't because she was assuming that I was this huge person. She gave me a size that was like not gonna fit snugly the way that it needed to. And so it made he was gassy. Like it was just a
Mhm.
mess. So then I finally got all that figured out. And I just remember that nurse going like, the things that I have seen where women who are larger than you, some women can only nurse from one side. She's like, you have no idea what I've seen in all of this. And I assure you, you are a very normal human being. I don't know why she said that, but no, you're going to be fine. And here's how we make this work. And I believe that she probably went back and said something because she knew the name of the person that I spoke to. But I can't,
Yeah.
why someone would try to I don't know. I think she thought she was being helpful, but it was very damaging in the first 3
Yes.
days to hear, "I've been a mom for an hour and a half, and this is the thing that you say to me." Who
Right.
says
Right.
that? What are you doing? So, yeah, that was
Yeah, and those postpartum moments, you're also already feeling a bit self-conscious about your body. It still is quite
totally.
squishy, and you've got milk leaking out, or maybe you don't have
I
milk
didn't
leaking out,
have any. That was an yeah,
right?
exactly. I didn't. Yeah,
So anything that might indicate that your body is not quote unquote normal is just going to
right.
increase that feeling of inefficacy at a time when everybody should be helping you to feel like you can do this.
And the stress of the if you're someone like me who didn't start to leak right away, and I don't know if it's because I didn't get that skin to skin or because I was so afraid or because I let my body just completely shut down and I was probably too tense to like even enjoy any of that moment. When you're someone like me and hearing things like that, you're already blaming yourself for everything as it is. I couldn't get him out in time and that's why I couldn't do skin to skin because I messed up when I was delivering and I'm already blaming myself for everything and
Mm,
then you say something that is completely beyond my control, i.e. the size of my body parts. And now I'm gonna just beat myself up even more about that. Oh man, I wish I sure could have controlled that when I was 13 and going through puberty. No one needs to be talked to that way in those first moments. And that is what happened. And I'm so grateful for that nurse and that home visit.
Yeah.
She was truly what I needed in those moments.
Yeah, that's so great. Were you experiencing any pain initially?
From nursing? Yes.
Mhm.
My letdown was painful. Yes. It was one of
Your
those
letdown itself.
my letdown
Okay.
itself was painful, but, yes, because the latch was not working properly, because the shield was the wrong like, a lot of it just wasn't it didn't feel comfortable either, which that was another thing, it was if it's so natural and people do it all the time, it clearly must not hurt that badly. Why does mine hurt? You know what I mean?
Right, and then often people say, and this doesn't sound like it was your experience, but I hear a lot people, "Well, so and so told me my latch looks good." And I always say, "You're the only person who can say whether or not your latch is good because you're the only person who can feel it."
Mhm.
Now, people like me can come in and we can help you make it more effective, change the positioning, will help you notice when you're tense, will help you recognize those pain signals if they're
Mhm.
happening. But if you're saying I'm in pain and somebody else, well, I don't know why because everything looks good, that's not helpful. We
Totally.
have to believe people when they say they're in pain.
That's, like, the least validating. No, you're not. You're fine. Everything's fine. No worries."
Right. Yeah.
"Oh,
Yeah.
everything's fine? It's supposed to be this painful? Oh, okay." And
Right.
my letdown, it did kinda peter out over time, but especially right away, like, that was I had never felt anything like that in my life. For me, it
Mhm.
was like when, like, one of your limbs falls asleep and then you get those really strong tingles after, that's how
Yes.
mine felt, and it didn't feel good.
Mhm.
So, it was a shocking sort of thing, and then to have the latch be uncomfortable on top of that, I was like, "This is weird."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you experience any increased anxiety right at the time of that letdown, or it was just the uncomfortable feeling?
It was almost like I would say yes. It was almost like when you're going down a roller coaster and you're like you take that deep breath before you if you take the deep breath, you can breathe while you're on the roller coaster, but if you forget to
Mhm.
breathe, you're gonna be holding your breath for the entire time. At least that's how I am. Kinda like that. Once I learned that, okay, this is the initial feeling before the letdown happens. Okay, now's the time to take a breath. And then I could feel my shoulders come down as the letdown happened. But I didn't learn that
Mhm.
right away. I didn't learn
Right,
that until
right.
later. Yeah.
Yeah, have you ever heard the term "demer"?
No.
You could have been experiencing a hormonal shift that happens for some people right at the time of the milk release called DEMER, and it's an increased level of anxiety. Sometimes the letdown is more painful.
Wow.
It doesn't happen with everybody, and I don't know the percentage of people that it happens with. And for some people, that happens for the entire time that they nurse their babies. For others, it fades over time.
Sure.
But usually when there's things like that happening right around the time of the milk release or the letdown, that it might
Wow.
have been something called DEMER that you were experiencing.
I'm likening it to, like a car accident. The person who
Mhm.
like an alcohol related incident where the person who's been drinking is relaxed, and so they often are not as injured as the person who is not, and
Mhm.
they're very tense, and then they get more injuries. That's how I'm picturing it, as like this anxiety piece makes it hurt worse, right? And,
Mhm.
wow, that is very interesting. I had never heard that, but it would make a lot of sense. It did, again, dissipate a few months in, but yeah,
Mhm.
those first few weeks, man, ooh, it
Yeah.
was awful.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't say for sure right now if that's what was
Sure,
happening, but it
yeah.
stands for dysphoric milk ejection reflex.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Who knew?
And yeah. I know. And then the only other thing I wanna say about your experience is I've said it many times before and I'll say it again, we cannot identify tethered oral ties, tongue and lip ties by just looking in a baby's mouth. It is a full oral assessment. It is a functional assessment, not just putting your eyes inside of a baby's mouth. It takes a lot more to identify whether or not that is contributing to nursing difficulty or airway difficulty or breathing difficulty or reflux, for instance, it can also often contribute to reflux or constant night wake. Like there are a lot
Oh, man.
of functional parts of having a tongue and lip tie that we need to be looking at and not just what it looks like inside of a baby's mouth because somebody could have a quote unquote mild, there's really no such thing, and have very severe symptoms, and other people could have very obvious anterior tie, and it's not impacting them nearly as much as somebody else.
Wow. That's ugh, I should and this is the other thing I can should all day long, and I probably need to stop doing this. But I also felt guilty for not pushing further and saying, "Yeah, I know you're looking at me. But you've looked at me. You've been in here for 5.5 minutes. Could I get
Mhm.
someone else to come in here and look at this?"
Mhm.
And I
Right.
kept thinking to myself when I learned that my son does have a lip and tongue tie when he was 3, why didn't I push harder? All of a sudden, everything just made so much sense to me. Like, my
Mm.
child's dentist was like, "Yeah, did you have any issues with nursing?" And I was just like, yes, I did." And
Yeah,
he
let me
goes,
count the
"Hey," yeah, he just goes, "Yeah, this is probably a big part of it." And, like, shows it
Mhm.
to me and shows me, like, what the X-rays are and I was just like, wow.
Mm.
Oh, and again, I can should all day long, but it doesn't help me now, and it didn't
That
help me then,
right.
and I the other thing is I should not have had to advocate that hard, right? I should
Mhm.
have
Right.
said, "I have a concern about this," and she should have not just peeked in and said, "Nope, he looks great," and then walked away. It should have been followed up on. That's the real
Right.
should here. Not really.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, did the pediatric dentist correct the tie at 3 years, or
No.
did he
No, he did not.
okay.
He said
Mhm.
that if the ear infections continued and the doctor started saying things like, "Hey, let's look at putting tubes in his ears," he was like, come back to me first. Let's
Mhm.
see what happened if I nip this for you and we address it myself, and then if the ear infections continue at the rate that they are, then we go back to the doctor and we do the tubes thing." But I think that maybe this is
Mhm.
the big impact, and then that was the year that the ear infection petered out, but we were going back every 2 to 3 months for an ear infection because it's like
Mm.
childhood colds and stuff, and then they don't drain properly because yeah, it was just ugh, it was horrible. It was all the time, and it was horrible. So, just the things
Mhm.
that it impacts later, I was blown away by, but
Ah,
no, he did not correct it. The issue seemed to have fixed itself. He does my son is already in orthodontia though, and he's 7. So
mm,
there are some things that we're working on now
yeah,
to fix what could have been fixed a while ago.
exactly. Yeah, it can take time.
There.
Yeah, I think that's good for people to hear that we think that the learning curve will resolve much more quickly than it does for many of us. And for
Mm-mm.
some people, it does. For
Yeah.
some people, they learn much quicker. And for other people, especially if there's things like tethered oral ties unidentified going on, it could take a lot longer for it to feel easy.
So just plugging our own show again, but this is what we talk about on our show is just motherhood is a real thing. It's not like this is one size fits all and this is just my real life, and I would rather be as honest as possible. When there's people who are not moms who ask me like, "What was it like to be pregnant?" I'm very honest about things. I will say for me it wasn't love at first sight with my baby because I had this moment of fear first. And I'm
Mhm.
very much an advocate for the healthcare system. I think treats um there's a whole candy bar analogy that I like to use where it's the baby is the candy bar, the mommy is the wrapper. And once the
Mhm.
baby's out, the wrapper is discarded. And I'm very much an advocate for moms, but I think that it's hard to relate to moms, especially in this era of Instagram filters. So many people put up their best mom moments, and I'm just going to be as real as possible and say, no, it wasn't easy for me. It took a few months for us to get into a groove. Like, he had teeth before it felt like it was totally normal, right? That's just
Mhm.
how it was for me, and I think everybody needs to know, no, it was not easy. Nothing about my motherhood journey has been easy at all.
Mm.
So,
Mhm.
I think that it's totally okay to have that feeling of like, why isn't this easy? Because it's not, right? So,
Mhm.
nursing is not easy. Some people it is, and bless you, but that's just not my experience, and again, months until we felt normal. Months.
Yeah, yeah. I know that you are an educator. You spent time in
Yes.
schools as a teacher. I was an educator for
Mhm.
about 10 years. I was an educator for maybe 6 years before I had my first child,
Mhm.
and I'd always been around children. I had babysat my entire life. I was a nanny. I became a teacher. I was a camp counselor when I was in my 20s. And so I was surprised by how difficult the transition to motherhood was, given how experienced I was with children.
Mm.
And so I'm wondering
Wow.
if you had that same sense of, "Whoa, I really thought this would be easier given my profession."
Literally every day, I think that every day. Now,
Yeah.
keep in mind, I feel like people who teach in elementary school, like, they do God's work. I can That is not for me. I am not an elementary school teacher. You can probably tell just from how I speak. That is not my style at all. I've always been a middle school and above kind of person. So, for me, the littles are a challenge. I don't even know how people I barely know how to talk to them. Like, I I can talk to my own son about some stuff, but I don't relate at all. I have the maturity level of a 13-year-old, so that's really where I always say, like, when he's 13, it won't be easy, but I'll at least get it, right? I will
Mhm.
know what he's up to in school. I will know the tricks, and I'll be there. But I'm with you. I grew up in a house of 5 children. When I moved out to go to school, my sister was 6 and my brother was 12. So, like, I know what it's like to be around little kids. I also was a camp counselor all through high school, and I became a teacher when I was 24, and I taught for 13 years. I feel like I get it with kids. Oh, no. My child, I don't know anything about what I'm doing. Nothing.
Mhm.
Nothing, and I'm
Mhm.
sure that when he does turn 12 and I have experience with that age group, I'm gonna be eating my words. I have no doubt in my mind. I have no doubt
Right.
because he's gonna be exactly what I don't expect because that's what kids are. I
Mhm.
really thought, "I'm gonna know how to do this. I'm gonna be good
Mhm.
at this." And I probably am good at it, but not the way I thought I was gonna be. You
Right.
know
Oh,
what I mean?
yeah. Oh,
Shocked every day. I have no clue what
right.
I'm doing all the time. It's a very humbling. Parenthood is humbling. Let's just put it that. No clue.
Yeah, and those early postpartum days
Oh.
r really are I haven't experienced the teen years, so maybe I'll say something different in a few years, but, uh they really are humbling in a way that many of us just did not expect,
Mhm.
and I think this is, partly due to the way we have such small nuclear families, so even if you grew up with siblings, humans evolved in these very large social groups where
Yeah.
everybody all the children were helping the other children, all the moms were helping the other moms, so each baby had between 5 and 12 primary caregivers, anthropologically speaking, in these hunter-gatherer groups that we evolved from, and so now we're in these isolated families where the infant has the mom primarily if it's a heterosexual couple, and then sometimes the dad is really involved and sometimes they're not. It's a very different ball game, and it is one of the reasons why motherhood feels way more difficult now than it ever used to because we are so isolated and we don't have the experience of our whole life being a part of a community that cares for each other.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like you were saying, 12 to 15 caregivers. I'm like, what I wouldn't give for 12 to
I know.
15 caregivers,
Right,
you
or
know?
even just 2,
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, like,
Right.
I have a few girlfriends who we talk about this all the time where we're like, "Can we just move to a commune?" And I swear, one of us will be home if you guys wanna go out or you need to go out and you
Mhm.
can't have your kids, like, just put them in our house, and we swear we will take care of everyone's but, like, it would just be so much easier.
Right,
Even close friends still probably don't live nearby. Like,
right.
and it's if you find that group that's so special, hang on to it because you're right, it is so much harder. It's very isolating, and there is this pressure to do so much more as a mom anyway, and you're doing it by yourself.
Right.
Hard.
Exactly. Yeah, and so for anyone who's in that postpartum period, it does feel hard. It feels harder than it used to feel, and your baby is reliant solely on you for so many
Mhm,
things, and sleep
mhm.
feels harder. It's not
'Cause it
that
is.
babies yeah, it's not that they're sleeping differently than they ever did. Babies are following natural baby sleep cycles, and if you're the only one caring for that baby all day and all night, or even if they're at work, but you're working too, if they're at daycare and you're working too, and then you come home and then you still have to care for that baby all night, that is very different than having lots of other people who can help to soothe that baby when they wake up at night.
Right, and I think that also you're reminding me of something. I think that there's this pressure for whoever the mother is, whether it's whoever the partner is. If someone's working outside of the home, the person who's had the baby feels like that person's sleep needs to be preserved. That person's energy
Mhm.
needs to be preserved. And so there is a very real pressure to take it on yourself because you're like, they're out of
Mhm.
the home. They need to be taking care of that so I need to make sure that I don't wake them up in the middle of the night with the baby. Uh-uh. No, because you're working
Mhm.
just as hard. So it is okay to say, yes, you're working outside of the home. However, I really need this assistance.
We often hear this idea that we had no idea how hard it was going to be in the postpartum period. And alongside of this, I'll often hear, nobody told me. Nobody told me what it was really like. Nobody told me how hard breastfeeding really was, or nobody told me how isolating the postpartum period can feel. And honestly, I don't feel like it's exactly that. I think we hear it. We hear that it's hard. We hear that breastfeeding can be hard. We hear that childbirth can be hard. And it can be really hard to know what that means for us or how we can prepare or what we can do differently to make it feel a little less hard. And we definitely have some societal restraints. We have some systemic barriers that make feeding our babies from our bodies difficult and that make the postpartum period more challenging today than it has been in the past. However, as an international board certified lactation consultant, a doula, and a certified childbirth educator, I have been thinking a lot about this idea, about how much we prepare for birth, about the importance of birth on our psyche and the impact that our birth experiences have on the postpartum period, and about how people can feel less surprised by their feelings in the postpartum period and by how hard taking care of another human being 24/7 feels once you're there. I have done a lot of look at the research. I've done a lot of interviewing people about what their experiences were like and what made it better and what made it worse. And I am so excited to be launching my very first childbirth education course. The first course is half off and you can sign up. I have 10 slots open. So this can be for you and a support person. So you pay the one fee, you both get to attend. It will be a live virtual class. So you can attend live, you can ask questions, you will be a part of a group that is sharing their experiences and brainstorming together. And it will also be recorded so that if you can't make a class, you will still have access to the private group, to the community, and to the videos with the lessons and all the course materials that will be provided. If you are due from about March on, then I highly recommend you sign up for this course. It is a childbirth education course that focuses on the postpartum period. I cannot wait to see your name pop up in my inbox when you sign up for the course that is linked in the show notes.
Sleep when the
I need
baby
help.
sleeps, guys. It's just the most unrealistic, right? Yeah, you can't do it alone. Your schedule is packed. My mom always referred to them as like a 2 hour baby or a 3 hour baby. Do you have a 3 hour baby or do you have a 2 hour baby? And you'll know because every 2 hours they need to nurse, or every
Mm-hmm.
3 hours they need to nurse. And usually it's somewhere in between there, right? I think my child was like a 2.5 hour baby, but that's when the cycle
Mm-hmm.
started itself over again. So it's like, okay, now we nurse,
Mm-hmm.
now we change diaper, now we start to settle in a little bit. Oh, now maybe mommy can have a protein bar. Oh, well,
Right.
now you're starting to fall asleep. Oh, must have been 2.5 hours. And then the whole thing starts over. You know what I mean? Especially those first 6 to 8 weeks. That's really what it looks like. So
Yeah.
definitely have, if that's a discussion at your house where, you're saying, I need to preserve their sleep. I highly recommend doing what you just said. Put it all on your calendar, pace it out.
Mm-hmm.
Write it all out
Mm-hmm.
and then make it look like it's a cycle so that every 2.5 hours, you know exactly what's going on. And you can add
Right.
it to your partner's calendar too and show them what you're doing.
Right. And then you can lower your expectations of any other thing you're expected to
Totally.
get
Yeah,
done.
because 'cause you're not gonna
Like,
do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, as we're coming here to the end, I would love to hear how breastfeeding ended for you, and if you have any memories that you'll hold on to from your entire time of nursing that you'll remember as an old lady in the nursing home.
M My memories are probably more funny than in terms of how my journey ended. When my son was about 6 months old, I went back into the classroom as a substitute teacher, and it was very difficult to be a substitute in a building. I was in one building primarily, but have the location change all the time because I never knew where I was gonna be able to pump, and that was a very difficult thing for me. That spring, I happened to get a full-time job at that school, and I was at that point like, "You know what? He's gotta wean. I can't go back for my first year teaching full-time in this building after having moved and all that, and learning a new curriculum and teaching new like, in a new school. I can't still be nursing and trying to figure out my pump schedule, especially in a classroom that was not really conducive, didn't have a space where I could really nurse or pump or anything. I decided that this summer, between when I wrapped up subbing and when I went back to work, I would wean him. And I remember right around 1 year, I was settling him in for sleep for a nap. It was in the afternoon, and I sat in our chair and I read our book that we always read that had the little songs that went along with it, and I prepared to nurse. And he looked at me, looked at my breast, looked at my face, looked at my breast again, and then sat up and turned away from it. And he was just
Mm.
like, "Nah, I'm good." And I went, "This is weird. Let's try this again." So I tried the other side. I did the things that I thought would make him be more interested, and he absolutely did not want any of it. And wasn't prepared for this, kind of hurt now. So I put him down for his nap and he slept without nursing. And it sort of kind of dissipated from there. One day he just
Wow.
decided, I don't want this anymore. And it was so
Mhm.
weird for me because if I had known my last one was going to be my last one, I might have done something differently. In a way, it was probably good because I probably would have cried knowing it was my last one. But he just went, "Nah, I'm good," and turned away.
Yeah.
And I remember being on this is the story that I will remember when I'm old. I was taking him to Colorado a couple weeks later, and we were on the plane, and I was going to try to nurse on the plane for the takeoff process.
Mm.
And I tried so hard and it was not happening. We're talking
Mm.
plane, we're talking hamming it up, and I'm like, "Can I at least put my boob away before you start playing with everyone around you? What is?" And it was just, it was like the typical toddler experience, and he wasn't a toddler, he was just 1. So
Wow.
he just decided, "I'm done now, mom." And I
Mhm.
remember being on that plane and going, "Okay, maybe we've nursed 2 or 3 times or maybe once a day since that first 'nah, I'm good' moment." But on the plane, I knew, like, this he's done.
Mm.
He is officially finished with this process. And
Wow.
I didn't have any issues with, like, leakage or anything. I think my body and my brain, I think everything was finally in sync, and I just went, "We're done." And I didn't have to worry about, like, random letdowns or leaking or anything like that. It was just he just decided he was finished, and my body decided with him or knew or something. Wild. That's
Mhm.
my story for the nursing home. And when
Yeah.
my whoever is in my life, maybe my son gets married, and who knows, but if she ever asks, like, "How did it end for you?" It's gonna be, "Oh, let me tell you about
Mhm.
this time I was on an airplane and my child was
Right.
flashing my boobs to everyone while he played because he wouldn't nurse."
Right.
We can talk about that one. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a very anticlimactic ending to our nursing journey.
Which is all we can ever hope for.
Totally,
Um,
totally. Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's probably the best way it could have ended, at least for me. I was like, after all this year of push-pull with our relationship with nursing, it's actually nice to have him just go, "You know what, mom? Thanks, but no thanks.
Mhm.
I'm good here."
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's
Worked out
great.
well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. This has been a great one.
I'm so glad to have done it. This was fun for me. It was a nice little walk down memory lane. I haven't thought about some of these things in a while. And I appreciate the opportunity. Anytime I can just keep it real for moms, I am all about it. So happy to have been here anytime you want to have me back, I would love to join you again. This was really fun for me.
Oh, great. And as we're closing, speaking of keeping it real, is there an episode of your own podcast that you are really proud of that you think my listeners should start with?
Oh man, that I'm really proud of.
Or that you just think is great?
So my co-host always says she loves 13 and 31, those two episodes that are number 13 and 31. She loves those ones. There are just some that are ridiculous and hilarious, and there's always she is the wackiest, most hilarious person. And I highly recommend if you don't have time to listen to the whole thing or you don't care about the topic, we do a segment called the Gem of the Week where we talk about either a moment where our children did something ridiculous or we embarrassed ourselves in front of other people. And even if you just listen to that one segment, I promise you'll be like, oh man, I'm so glad it's not just me. So yeah, we have a good time. We'd love to have you over there if you just need a moment to laugh about being a mom.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So my message to you is if breastfeeding has felt harder than you thought it would be, that first of all, you're not alone. And second of all, it's not your fault. And stories like Caitlin's help to normalize this experience, but also give us hope that when it feels hard, it doesn't necessarily always have to be hard. And if you are really struggling, you can reach out to me. I would love to help you through your breastfeeding difficulties, even if it's just to be somebody who says, I know you're working really hard, it sucks, and it's not fair, and give you some tips on how to adjust course or how to make it feel emotionally easier. I'm here for you. So just reach out. You can go to quabbinbirthservices.com. That is also where you can sign up for my new childbirth education course that's launching early 2024. You can get half off right now if you sign up soon. I was looking at the CK and GK podcast. They have such interesting topics. Some of them are really practical for moms who are managing so much at home, like save time, money, and stress on buying home appliances. That's pretty practical. Then there are episodes like stopping relationship burnout or preparing for your kids' back to school time. And then there are also really fun ones like dinosaurs, pyramids, and chainsaws. 8 must-known hidden history facts. So there's all sorts of stuff there, and it's done in a light way with lots of brevity. So if you are looking for a new podcast from two moms who are interested and curious about the world and want to bring a lightness and a brevity to whatever they do, then check out their podcast. And listen, we are headed into the busiest season of the year for most moms. And if you are thinking it is not possible for me to add anything else to my plate, if you are in this boat and you want to get something off your plate, go to feastandfettle.com. You get $30 off your first order with my code MILK, M-I-L-K, and you can check out their menus. They have lunch menus if that's what you want to get off your plate, or dinner menus. So don't forget to check that out if you're feeling burnt out.